Hi African Queen Mo subscribers and friends. Thank you for joining me today. Yes, it's another day. Um, if you live here in Europe, then you are aware about what's going on here, which is basically the cost of living crisis that we are experiencing here. And of course, you know, the problem with migration, illegal migration in the country. And this is something that has triggered reactions from countries such as the Netherlands with what they call Nexit, which is like Brexit, where Britain decided to exit the European Union in 2020, and then through a referendum. And now we have Netherlands, which has elected its own prime minister, who is determined to perform Nexit. And then we also have Sweden, that's looking to do Swexit. We also have countries in Africa that are also exiting the Europe out of the domination by France, together with Burkina Faso and Mali have all decided to do a Fraxit, an exit from France. We are seeing a lot of push coming to shove in many countries, and the reason is countries are becoming more nationalistic. They're looking more internally and thinking about their own citizens and their own welfare. So Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, they met in Bamako recently, okay, to discuss basically their financial situation of their three countries under their transitional governments, which are led by prime ministers that have been like just appointed by their militaries to take care of the financial situation. So they're going to be discussing issues to do with the finance and the economy of the three countries amidst the regional and international sanctions. So the African countries are experiencing sanctions as we speak right now from many European countries. And meanwhile, some European countries are looking to exit the European Union, and I wonder whether they will also be facing sanctions from them. So that's giving you a little bit of a background about where we are today in the world, and without looking at the entire globe. But I want to narrow my focus now to a country called Kenya, which at the moment is experiencing a serious financial crisis where the government is literally on its knees and could potentially default on loans, especially some that are maturing next year, such as the Eurobond in 2024. At the moment, Kenya is facing a crisis of unprecedented proportions. And this is something that happened almost immediately after the elections, whereas the last 1 year, the country has been on a very serious borrowing spree, an unmitigated borrowing spree, up to the amount of 4 trillion shillings. And at the moment, recently, the government has decided to sell off certain parastatals, organizations within the government that are partially owned by the state and partially privately owned, and they have decided to completely, not just to privatize them, but to sell them off. And some of them include things like the National Oil Corporation, the Kenya Creameries, Cooperative Creameries, the Kenyatta International Conference Center, and several others. So I don't know to what extent you're aware, but yes, Kenya is now selling its assets to try to pay off debt. And this is by mention of the president himself. In addition to selling off Kenyan assets in order to pay for debt, which has been incurred by the government, some of which is actually illegal debt because that debt was not approved by Parliament. In addition to doing that, the government has also stepped up its mandate of collecting taxes from Kenyans and from Kenyan businesses. This has caused a situation in the country where many businesses have actually signaled some sort of distress, and these companies have actually issued a profit warning. And all these companies are the dates that they were issued as of, let's just say, this whole year. We are looking at about 13 plus 11, that is actually 24 companies. As of 30th December 2021 up until 30th December 2023, these are, for example, Kakuzi, which is basically does pineapples. We have Limuru Tea. These are tea packers and tea growers. Unga Group, the flour mills called Unga Group. Samir Africa, which basically do machineries. We have the Nairobi Stock Exchange, which provides investment services. We have the Bamburi Cement, which manufactures cement for building. We have Crown Paints, which is a paint organization. We have the Standard Group, which is actually the banking group. We have Everready, which is a battery company that actually eventually moved out of the country, but they issued theirs as of 25th January. Perhaps they're still paying off taxes. There's the Kenya Airways itself. There's the Kenya Power Lighting Company. We have Nation Media Group, and all of them are citing, the reasons that they're citing for their company's profit warnings are either foreign exchange losses because of the devaluation of the Kenya shilling by about 40% over the period, and rising costs. It's actually, officially it's probably about 25%, but actually in the black market we're looking at probably about 40%, which is where people are actually doing a lot of the exchange rates right now, because banks are limiting the amount of foreign exchange that can be withdrawn at a single time. So they're citing things like rising costs, currency depreciation, the general business slowdown, and they are also citing increased production costs and reduced prices for their commodities such as coffee. Where they are also looking at premium default claims. By the way, the level of default, yes, what they call non-performing loans are standing currently at approximately 15%. And compared to 14% last year. So that means a lot of people are having a difficulty in repaying their loans. And the situation with default is also high. Kenyans are defaulting on approximately 596 billion shillings, which is half a trillion, because of the interest rates that are hitting the ceiling. So what's happening is that the interest rates have gone up. Kenyans are unable to repay their loans. The loan default rate is very high. We're looking at 15% is actually high. Anything above 10% is very significant, okay? But so Kenyans right now are in great debt distress, we can say. Kenyans themselves. So Kenya itself as a country is undergoing debt distress, and unsurprisingly, Kenyans themselves are also experiencing the same. In this particular country of the UK, we also have the same kind of problem happening because of the increased interest rates. Over the period of the last 2 years, there's been high interest rates on mortgages, which have left people out of pocket and unable to pay their mortgages, and many of them have decided to sell off. Many people are selling off their homes and looking for cheaper homes to buy or going into rentals. Rentals are also going up. There are not enough houses to go around for the demand. Demand outstrips the supply of houses in the UK, and therefore the cost of rental homes is very high. It is difficult to qualify for a mortgage in this country unless you have a pay slip. And even when you do have a pay slip and the money, you also have to demonstrate that you have a good credit history and are able to pay back that money. So a lot of people are also not able to get onto the property ladder, and this has caused in the UK people to go back to their parents' homes to live there. In countries such as Kenya, in Africa, when people are not able to pay their rents, they also either move back home or they go into cheaper rentals, and they move out of the city center and go out into the rural villages to work and to live. And it makes it more difficult. I know of specific people who have had to move back to their rural homes, and right now they are literally almost destitute because the purchasing power of the people at the rural area is very low. People to go into farming. Some of the people have gone into farming in a big way, but unfortunately, because of the status of the roads, because of the status of the climate, currently we're going through El Nino and we've just come through a drought. So you can imagine the soil erosion that is going on, the road erosion as well as the cost of doing business. The cost of transporting farm produce from the farm to the market has increased. Why has that happened? Because a lot of people who used to transport and ferry produce from the farms stopped doing that during the last 10 years of government, because the government borrowed a lot of money for infrastructure from China. So a lot of people ended up using those same lorries to ferry material for building of roads, for construction. They got into tenders and contracts with the Chinese road builders and also with the government for supply of road building materials such as sand, such as ballast. And I do have a friend who got into that. And farmers could definitely just not compete anymore. So it became difficult for the farmers to continue farming, and many of them actually just left farming and either went into the same business or, just relaxed. And therefore, food prices started to go up because Kenya had to start importing food because we can no longer produce our own food and sell it because a lot of farmers actually went out of business. So it's a complicated situation in Kenya, and this currently is fueling a crisis where people can no longer afford food on their table because we have now become a net importer of food. We import even the milli meal, even our basic diet, the Kenyan basic diet, which is called ugali, which is maize meal, we do import. And also the other problem with that is because you see, agriculture was, as much as devolution is good, which means giving more power to the counties, it's good. What happened is that if you don't have honest people running those counties, what happens is that they use these opportunities to import food rather than encourage farmers to grow it. So Kenya became a net importer of maize meal, and so we don't even just net import from the region. We also import from countries such as Mexico, South Africa, and many other countries. So our food reserves are low, and there's a lot of competition and a lot of politicking with it. There's a lot of corruption and big heists, that have happened with government money on things like oil dealings and things like that. Tax-free importation of cooking oil, which means that the local manufacturer cannot compete. Okay, so, and then just to find out that particular cooking oil needs to be reprocessed because it was poor quality. So there's a lot of government wastage of Kenyans' funds, and we are in a situation right now in Kenya where people can hardly afford to eat. The education is also expensive. The government is not able to disseminate the loans to students so that they can go to school, and so when they finish their high school, they're just loitering around without being able to go to university. The ones who are already in university are not receiving their loans, so they're finding it difficult to study, and they're getting up to some sort of mischief now because the government is unable to maintain them there. And then also with transportation, I mentioned to you before, because the current government removed the subsidies on oil currently, therefore it has impacted on the cost of not just fuel, but also energy for cooking, and also transportation. And once you increase the cost of fuel, then in that case you affect every other sector of society. Because energy, for example, electricity, and also, of course, diesel trucks need to transport food back and forth through the country, and as well as building materials and many other products. So, unfortunately, we are in this catch-22 situation. So, where am I going to from here? I've been listening a lot to our current, in Kenya we have political analysts, armchair political analysts, I call them. And like myself, I don't consider myself a political analyst. I just consider myself just a member of the population who is interested in conducting research. And, I like to use figures and things like that. But today we're going to give you my opinion piece about this and also tell you where we might be going from here. Currently, the temperatures are very high in Kenya, and people are very concerned and worried about the future. People do not feel secure. There's a sense of insecurity, a sense of dread, and a sense of gloom that is hanging over the country of Kenya. There's a very dark cloud that is hanging over the country of Kenya. And the blame game is all over, blaming everybody. You blame from the judiciary to the parliamentarians, to the religious leaders, to the people in their tribes, to women, to men. Everybody is blaming everybody for the current situation, including, of course, the president, who is getting enough blame for where we are right now. Yeah. So as the government is busy collecting taxes, impoverishing Kenyans, and literally, trying to fight debt in all the wrong ways, Kenyans are feeling more and more the pressure to say enough is enough, and to say, What are our options going forward? Well, I've been doing my research. We now have a constitution, which is Constitution 2010. We have an option as Kenyans to come together and say, enough is enough. We can actually sit down, guys, and say, we do not want to be led by this leader anymore. And if we say that, then what do we do? Do we burn down the country? No, absolutely not. So what can we do? What can we do legally? What is our sense of recourse, as citizens of our countries? Well, we do have opportunities. So for example, our Constitution of Kenya gives us two basic ways of literally changing the leadership that we have currently. We have two options. We are not stuck. We have two options still going forward. Just because we came through an election, if it's not working, we do have ways of going around this, okay? So let me put on my glasses here. So there are two main ways of doing it, either directly or indirectly. The direct way of doing things is, first of all, with the understanding that all sovereign power belongs to the people, all right, of Kenya, and shall be exercised only in accordance with the Constitution. The people may exercise their sovereign power either directly or through their democratically elected representatives. So we can either decide to wake up one day and march and say enough is enough, do a big demonstration, and we go into referendum, or we go into a vote for the whole country. The whole country can actually vote and decide enough is enough with this government. We do not want to be led by this person anymore. And then a caretaker government will be put into place. It will be the military. If it's not the military, it could be a prime minister, somebody who's a temporary, is like a temp. A temporary person would be put into place, elected by, or should I say appointed by the people of Kenya to hold the country down until we can go back to the ballot box and hold a fresh election. We can either do it that way, or so basically what it means is that we can either go directly or indirectly, okay? We can think of a referendum or a presidential election indirectly, or we can go indirectly, which means through parliament, yeah? Which means laws, changing the laws, amending the laws, impeachment, okay? Through parliament. And the Constitution does not envisage ruling by a mob. That means the instruments of power can only be passed in those two ways. So in order to pass the instruments of power, okay, we can either do it directly, okay, which means through the ballot, which means a referendum or a presidential election, or we can do it indirectly through parliament. Now, the problem of going through parliament is that we are aware that we know that there's a risk that there are parliamentarians who have been compromised, who might not be acting in the best interest of the people, and they have definitely demonstrated that many of them are not on the side of the people. And therefore, as myself, African Queen Mo, my thought is that Kenyans should seriously consider going for a referendum just like UK did with Brexit, and exercise our sovereign right as a people of Kenya directly, or go for presidential election. We are aware that presidential election has not worked before for us, and therefore a referendum would be a vote. If we were to decide to do a vote online, and if everybody was given a way to do a digital vote online, which could be managed by a company or by an organization that is elected by the people of Kenya to handle it, then we can vote and decide which direction to go. Okay, whether we keep the current regime, or we get rid of the current regime. Okay, so my suggestion would be, guys, I think we need to go for a referendum. You see, referendums work. They work. Right now, we have countries that are going through there are potential countries that are going to probably go through referendum very soon. We have the country of the Netherlands, okay, that just recently elected a new prime minister who might be taking the country to a referendum to exit the European Union. We have the Swedish as well, who are looking at Swexit, and they're inspired by the referendum of the British through Brexit. What Brexit does is that it protects the sovereignty of the people of the country. All right. What's important, though, is that it should be implemented in a way that it does not alter the gains, that it does not quash the gains of the previous regime, but that it actually protects the sovereign rights of the people and ensures that there is smooth transition. And this is what Theresa May was talking about, coming up with some sort of a deal. You know, you come with a deal, you come with an agreement that this is the way we're going forward. Because we don't want to go to a referendum and then find ourselves in hot soup. We want to make sure that we are doing this for the benefit of our country, to make sure that our country is being managed the way it should be, and to avoid the problems that Kenya is experiencing at the moment. So guys, how about a referendum? How about it? Let's think through this. Now what we need is the lawyers on board. The people who wrote the constitution need to come back together. The sovereign people of Kenya should call for the constitutional writers to help us to draw up a referendum, the terms of the referendum and the deal that is going to go forward, and to maintain our sovereignty as a nation. We could call for our parliamentarians, but unfortunately our parliamentarians at the moment may not be in a position to represent the people the way they should, majority of them. Of course, there are many who are representing the voice of the people, but if they are given, if we could find a way to back up our parliamentarians, perhaps they would come together and protect the sovereignty of the country and the sovereignty of the people of Kenya. But that is highly debatable. I think at the moment, as Kenyans, we can only trust ourselves. Okay, so I hope that my message has come across clearly, that my views about Kenya is that we should be looking into a referendum, stop the talk shops, and let us look at our current situation in terms of our governorship of the country and see where we go from here. What do you think about this, guys? I'm looking forward to hear from you. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you for your ear. It would be nice to have this debate and to talk about it in detail. So thank you very much. Remember to subscribe, like and share. Put a thumbs up on this video, guys, and share it. And let's talk about this potential for referendum in Kenya to say no, we do not want to continue with this leadership. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.